Okay, today we are going to be going through Criterion C reflection portion of your internal assessment. You can see here on our tentative timeline that we've done a good job of sticking to, that the due date for this portion of your paper is May 16th. So it's Sunday, May 16th. And this portion of your paper is 400 words. And so kind of as you wrap your head around what we're doing, there's the broad overview is 400 words, and it's due by May 16th for the 2021 school year, in case I use this in the future. Looking at kind of the bigger picture, this also means that this is the final portion of your paper. And so after you submit this, you should have a completed first draft of your paper, and we will go into a revision phase. And so I'm going to walk you through Criterion C requirements and directions, which if you look at your packet will be found on pages 12 to 13 of the IB guide. And so we'll jump to page 12 to take a look at it. So we've got history IA Criterion C reflection and reflection of historical research methods. This is due, as I've already mentioned, May 16th at 9 p.m. So I'm going to read through this. I'll add some commentary, just some things to think about as we go that will help guide you through this part of the IA. So this section of the internal assessment task requires students reflect on what undertaking their investigation highlighted to them about the methods used by and the challenges facing the historian. So now that you've completed Criterion B, your investigation, you've answered your question, you've provided evidence, you've provided analysis of that evidence. What this reflection is you looking back and reflecting on that process. And in that process, you are the historian. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. That the reflection is you reflecting back on you following the process that historians follow. So again, this is bolded and underlined for a reason. You're looking at the methods used by and the challenges facing the historian. This will be the last section you formally finish at the end of the research process and should be around 400 words. In this section, you can talk about, and you should talk about yourself and what you learned. You're going to connect this process to find an answer to your questions to what you learned about the historical research methods. And so first person is acceptable for this. I'll break down that bullet point more here as we go. I do recommend you look at samples. Samples will be posted along with this assignment to get an idea of what this section looks like. It should be an easy 4 out of 4 marks, but oftentimes it is not. You do need to give this attention, formality, and structure, because if you don't, it could easily result in 0 out of 4 marks for this portion of the paper. And just kind of some commentary on this. I often describe this as an easier part of the paper, and I do think that that is the case, but that does not mean you should sit down and just type it out and submit the first thing that you type it out. There should be structure. It should have an academic tone to it, and it shouldn't be like a journal or diary entry. This should still have an academic tone to it. So while you discuss these methods and challenges you've faced, I've got a list of things that you can talk about. Now, obviously, with 400 words, you can't talk about all of these things, but these are kind of prompts to get you started and what to focus on. And again, I think looking at examples will help you out with that as well. So when looking at methods, what methods used by historians did you use in your investigation? And so you could highlight the types of sources that you use. And so we've got a whole list of primary sources there. You could highlight your use of secondary sources. And so what secondary sources did you rely on? And then some discussion as to why. So why was this the path that you followed? And again, you're not going through and answering these questions in bullet point format. You're using these as jumping off points to reflect on your process of conducting the historical investigation. So What was one of the first methods you employed and why? Did blank method lead you to discover another method that was more or less helpful? What method did you find the most or least helpful? What was the most challenging? Was there a method used early but ended up not using, and why? In terms of IB grading, and we'll talk about the IB grading and rubric here in a few minutes, but methods means you clearly understand that there's a good number of research methods available to the historian. By specifically highlighting primary and secondary and sources you encountered during your research. And these methods are specifically linked to your IA question and research. And that idea of being specifically linked to your IA is something that I'll come back to here in a few minutes as well. The second piece, what did your investigation highlight to you about the challenges and limitations of your chosen research method? So discussing these methods, what challenges and limitations did you face? And so we've got some questions to kind of be a jumping off points with challenges. So I'm not going to read them all to you, but you can see a series of them there. The same thing with reliability of your sources. And so kind of how you as a historian determine what sources to use or not to use based on reliability, availability of evidence. So as you conducted that research, you're going to reflect on the process of gathering your information. And again, we've got some thoughts or ideas to get you started. When you look at the samples, I recommend you read these first and kind of look and see what areas did the samples address. I've mentioned this several times, but I will continue to. You will not be able to address all of these bullet points in the 400 words that you have. And so when IB is grading the challenges and limitations, it says you clearly understand those challenges, limitations faced in reaching conclusions and carrying out an effective IA. These challenges and limitations are specifically linked to your IA question and research. And so jumping down to the rubric, and I do have the official rubric, I think it's like on page 2 or 3 of this packet, but it's also here. This looks slightly different, but the verbiage comes directly from the actual IB rubric. So this column here is the actual IB rubric, and then this is me kind of translating that to regular language. Looking at it, you can see there are two, I guess really 3 mark bands because you've got the 0, but you're either going to fall within hopefully the 1 to 2 range, or even more hopefully the 3 to 4 mark band range. And so I want to kind of highlight quickly the differences and what will push you from say a 1 to 2 to a 3 or 4. So if you're in the 1 to 2 mark band range, the first thing says the reflection contains some discussion of what the investigation highlighted to the student about the methods used by the historian. The portion of that would push you to the 3 to 4 range is that it is clearly focused on what the investigation highlighted to the student about the methods used by the historian. The second one is the reflection demonstrates little awareness of the challenges facing the historian and or the limitations of the methods used by the historian. And then again, we've got clear awareness. So these two, very similar. In one, you're being a little bit more vague, I guess, where the clear kind of jump from the 1 to 2 mark band to the 3 to 4 comes with this last bullet point. So the connection between the reflection and the rest of the investigation is implied, but not explicit, whereas the 3 to 4 mark band, there is a clear and explicit connection between the reflection and the rest of the investigation. This term here, explicit connection, you need to make sure that you're giving specific examples to your process, to your paper. Too often with reflections, I see reflections that are written kind of in broad general terms, where I could cut that reflection off of that paper and put it on someone else's internal assessment, and you wouldn't notice because they're not directly connecting their process, their reflection to the paper that they wrote or to the question that they addressed. Again, you're not giving more content. You are not arguing the answer to your question. You're focused on the process. But with that focus on the process, you should cite specific examples related to your research question in investigation. So that's how you go from the 1 to 2 mark band range to the 3 to 4. This column here is basically outlining what I just discussed, just putting the IB descriptors into kind of more normal guidelines and language. And so once you finish these 400 words, this 400 word section, you should have a complete draft. I encourage you on your own to start the revision process, but we will do that as a class next week as well. We're going to first focus on getting citations right, and I'll go ahead and scroll down just to preview that. And you can see formatting and citations here. There's even a video to help you with that process. So we're going to go through citations, and then we will start the self-evaluation process. And you will also, once you've done that self-evaluation, you will have the opportunity to have peers look at your paper as well.